Hello there, and welcome to the latest episode in the Accelerate Agile series from agilecoach.com.au. Thank you very much for joining me. We are going to do a topic today which I think might dispel a few myths, might strengthen some of the practices you've got in your organization. It's about documentation. And the reason why I'm doing a podcast about this one and a webinar about this one is because some people misunderstand Agile and think there is no need for documentation. They think there's no need for planning. And in fact, those two things are absolutely required in business. They just are, and certainly in a knowledge-based team, which most of these development teams or change teams that I've tended to apply Agile in need. So we're going to go through documentation. In particular, I want to go through cards. And I had originally thought about calling this episode cards, boards, and timelines. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about all documentation. Okay, so this could be quite a quick one, and it's really an introduction to things that I will expand on in later episodes. So if we jump in, like I say, I was going to go look about cards, boards, and timelines because that's really the window that gets you to the documentation. And so when I talk about those, they're really part of the holy trinity of the three things that if you want to run agile, build everything on having good foundations. And if you want good foundations, I would say there are three things you want to get in place. And one of them is your documentation. But I would say that that is delivered by having a good backlog. And that's a backlog of cards on a board. The other two things in that holy trinity are cadence, so an operating rhythm, and ceremonies to look after your work and look after your people. So those three things are absolutely the foundations. And I'm talking about one of them today. I've already done cadence and ceremonies. I've done mastering ceremonies, which is just an introduction, and cadence. You can check those out on the website or check the newsletters on LinkedIn. I'm going to talk today about documentation side of things. So the reason why documents are really important, and the other two things, is they help you plan, track, and collaborate. They're not going to write a line of code for you. They're not going to get the team working well together. They're not going to get a lot of things that you need to become a high performing team, but they are going to be the foundation of all planning, tracking, and drive some collaboration. But the planning and tracking, really, you need documentation. You don't want to come to every meeting and restart the where we are, etc. So you have documentation. It's evergreen. It stays alive. So, and the reason for really me having to restate this is way too many people read that line there that's on the screen, which is from the Agile Manifesto, one of the four values. It's like a quarter of the Agile Manifesto, really. Working software over comprehensive documentation. And some people read that go, well, it's all about doing the work and not writing it down. And that's simply not the case. My journey from waterfall into agile didn't change how we deliver. It just we still have the same process. We just changed the order and changed the size of things. And I added a bit more structure around it and a little bit more trust and changing culture. The documentation remained the same. We just changed the way we presented it. And I'm going to go into that right now. So let's go back to project yesterday. Let's go back to when you were working waterfall, I was working waterfall, everyone was working waterfall. But let's just go back like 10, 15 years. Um, a lot of organizations still were working at waterfall then, and you would get a project manager or you start a project, or you'd be a few days into the project, you'd almost certainly have a G drive folder, if you remember the G drive, and it would have set documents in it. Now on the screen I've put a Google Drive one, so because I can't even find a G drive, but on the G drive there would be a requirements document, there would be a functional spec document, how we're going to deliver it. There'd be a risk register. Must put risks into a register. There'd probably be a project plan of some sort, looking like a Gantt chart, and there would be some sort of updates. There would be probably a PowerPoint. So let's just go with those five documents. Now, I would expect that G Drive folder would actually be a lot more than that, but they would have at least those five documents. I mean, we're talking, if you're talking about a PID document for a project initiation document, you might have a business case and all of those. But I'm going to talk about these five because these five you absolutely, I don't know about the risk register, but you do need to capture your risks. You absolutely need to still capture these things. You still need to give updates. You still need a good forecasting tool. You still need to say, well, what's the expectation of the business? What are the requirements? What's the expectation of the customer? What is it we're trying to achieve, and how are we going to achieve it? So all of those still exist. So I've got all these. So the requirements, the functions. So now I put these names down against these things. They still exist, but they might have changed their name. And that's one of the things that frustrates everybody in Agile. There's all these new names for things, but really just look at it as the life cycle of development. You're going to need to know what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, forecast when it's going to be done by, and just monitor and report on it. Those are the way of working. And even in the most agile team, you might only be doing your reporting to your team members, but there's always some reporting that goes on because there's dependencies and stuff like that. So let's have a look at what it's like today in a well-performing, high-performing team. To be honest, in a high-performing team, what are they going to have? Well, they're going to have a board to visualize the work. I've not been in a high-performing team. If you're a team of 1 or 2, maybe not, but proper sized teams, 6 or more, 6 to 8, working in a scale environment where there are other teams, you have a board to represent everything. Every single bit of that documentation is represented on this board. So on this board, we have the requirement. It's generally called an epic or something like that. It's put onto a board, and when you put in your next part, how we're going to do it, so the requirement is the what are we going to achieve, you nest it underneath it. And so on here, we have the function and we have the requirement on this board. And at the moment, it's also telling us the state because it's on the board and it's on the weekly board and it's in the to-do. So we can always look and change this and change the views and have a look at the timeline, and that will tell us some idea of the progress. But actually, the Kanban also gives us the progress. So we've got 2 places we can get the progress from. There's no reason to set up a Gantt chart. There's no reason to have another document. So far, we've already got our requirements on what we expect to deliver, which on this one is subscriptions to LinkedIn to be over 1,000, and we've got the function of how we're going to do that. We're going to read and create 5 articles about measure what matters. So that's those first 2 things done. You can also get updates on that by changing the view or looking at the Kanban and seeing where things are. So you're getting a lot of your documents put in there already. You can also add your risks onto this board and track them and watch them go from one side of a board to the other. So plain Kanban board. Is the risk new? Is it being worked on? Or are we now closed for whatever reason it could be closed? So you can put everything on this board. And really, the reason why I'm even doing this episode is to talk about what we do when we move from the traditional big documents to agile is we're not really implementing a new set of documents or a different set of documents or a change in technology for the documents, even though I've showed you Google, which nobody's ever used they use G drives. To this, what we're really talking about here is there is a fundamental difference in the documentation, a foundational thing. We're going to stop writing entire documents or storing things in a binder. I mean, we're now all working digitally, but we used to have a binder that went on a shelf. We don't do that anymore. And we don't do a digital representation of that. What we do is we write everything on cards. Everything. Now, I'm going to give you a real physical example of this. Of when I was at university, I worked as a landscaper. Jobs came in to be done that sometimes took months. Landscaping entire industrial estates that were new. The bosses there, it was a command and control mechanism, but there's a lot of autonomy. You'd go out to the site and the boss wouldn't be there. Would not give you a folder of all the jobs that had to be done on that site over the next 3-4 months. They would put cards on the wall. There's your job card. These are the people that are going with you today. They'd be the crew, and you'd go and do that job card, and it'd have the outcomes that they wanted for that week normally, because you go there and you'd work through it for the week. That would be their iteration. So it's not a new process to use cards, and in fact, the Kanban boards are from the 1940s. So we're just really now getting mature at doing this digitally. And in software development, the important thing is we're stopping writing big requirements documents. We're stopping writing functional specs, and instead we're working on cards because that allows us to track the progress. Now, if you are still doing those things, if you're still using cards and if you're still using documents, that's a challenge because often that happens as well early on in the project. So requirements are written into a document. You never get out of that. So if you want to be agile, you've got to start from the beginning and think about this from the beginning. And that will allow, if you put everything onto cards, to have a look at the timeline and see things differently. Same cards. So you can see any way you like. And the real beauty of this is you can have those different views of the same card because it's a digital system. You can have one card that says we want to get our LinkedIn members up to 1,000, and that can appear on two different views. It can appear on a timeline view, which is replacing your Gantt chart, and it can appear on a list view, which is a backlog view or a board view, which is for the team to look at their to-do list. These tools are really, really, really good. And I get quite a lot of people in the Agile community saying Jira is not Agile, going to Jira is not Agile. Well, no, but it's a really good foundational step. It's a really good foundational step. And it's a bit like saying, well, you're not a carpenter just because you know how to use the tools. Well, no, you're not. But you're also not a very good carpenter if you don't know how to use the tools. So try and get to use the tools because they really are going to benefit you. And I'm not bound to any of these tools. I do have my favorites. I don't think Monday.com is very good. I think it's a very good marketed company. As opposed to Azure boards and Jira are fantastic. They're over-engineered though, so be careful not to get in there and try to put workflows together too much. Trello was very, very good, still is very good, because it's simplicity. What you do find in these teams, though, is as you mature as a team, you want to improve. And what you can get is if you use these more advanced tools like Jira and Azure Boards, you can get objective measures from them about how you've tracked. Loads of agile coaches will point you towards Miro or whiteboards. Yeah, that's good for starting up, but you'll never ever be able to get controlled data out of it. You'll never be able to see, well, how many features have we delivered this year? And I'm picking a metric there that's not necessarily a very good metric, but at least you've got some objective evidence about how you've done, as opposed to hearsay and subjective opinion, which is what drives many corporate environments. And I'd rather not base my improvements on subjective opinions or the topic of the day. So these tools will give you those measures as well. Slightly off topic. So documentation. I'll just wrap up by really saying, if you are looking to moving to becoming agile, or if you're looking at improving your agility in your team, using cards is the form to document things. Don't stop documenting things. And there's loads and loads of tricks. And I'll move into that in future episodes of podcasts and webinars. But for now, just the only thing I wanted to leave you with was documentation is important. Comprehensive documentation is also important, but not upfront. You can progressively elaborate this on cards. Please use cards because cards are very, very powerful and you can use them to then track and plan and collaborate throughout the process. Thank you very much for joining me today. All of these webinars and podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts. They're also available on YouTube and the newsletter on LinkedIn, or you can visit the site there at agilecoach.com.au. You have yourself a very good day.